Hi guys, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about our last way to solve, which is by using quadratic formula. Hopefully you guys have heard of the quadratic formula before, but you will need your quadratic formula note sheet, which is posted on Google Classroom, and you'll want a pen or a pencil and your calculator. Okay, so today we are going to solve quadratics by using the quadratic formula. And here it is. So it is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, where a cannot equal 0. Okay, so this is a really important formula. You're going to want to write this down somewhere, have it in your notes. Some of you might have it memorized already. Some of you might know the song, but you're definitely going to want to use, or you're going to need to use this quite often. Okay. So here are your steps. The first thing we're going to do is make sure that our equations are in standard form, and we're going to make sure that they're set equal to 0 and in descending order, just like we have been through factoring and a lot of our different solving techniques. Okay. Then what we'll do is we'll identify what your A, B, and C values are once it's in standard form. And then all you really need to do is substitute those values in where they belong in this formula. So you're just going to plug them in. And then what you'll want to do is evaluate this part under the radical first, this b squared minus 4ac. And then you'll simplify the radical or the fraction if needed, and then you are done. All right, so let's try some examples here. Okay. So first of all, let's get this into standard form. So we are going to have to add this 4 over. So then in standard form, this would look like 4x squared plus 11x plus 4 equals 0. Okay. So we're all good. It's in standard form, descending order, set equal to 0. Now let's identify what our A, B, and C values are. So A is this 4 out front. B is this 11. And C is the constant 4 that we just added over. Okay, so now we're going to plug it into this formula. So we've got x equals, and when it says negative b, it just means the opposite sign of what your b is. So since b is positive, we are going to write that as negative 11. And then we do need the plus or minus, just like we did the other day. And then square root of b squared, so b is again 11 squared. And then minus 4 times a, which is also 4, times c, which is also 4. But it's 4ac. All over 2a, so 2 times 4. So now what we want to do is, as I mentioned, you want to do what's under the radical first. So we would literally, just plug all of this into our calculator. So you would do, with the parentheses, so 11 squared minus 4 times 4 times 4. Okay? And you can do it in parentheses just how I have it written. And you should get that that equals 57. So now we're going to rewrite this as negative 11 plus or minus the square root of, and remember we did what's under the radical first and we just got 57 in the calculator. And then all over 2 times 4 we know is 8, so we can plug that in as well. Okay. Now you have to think to yourself, does the radical 57 break down? And so if you start thinking of what 57 would divide by, the answer is no. This is not going to break down, so this is your simplest form. So this would be your final answer here. Negative 11 plus or minus the square root of 57 all over 8. Okay, now I know it looks a little bit ugly and you're like, well, that doesn't look like some of the answers we've gotten before, but that's okay. This is telling us that the solutions would be kind of like a decimal, because if we did take that square root of 57, we would get a decimal. But this is your exact answer, and we want to leave it nice and neat like this with the positive and negative versions, okay? Because of that plus or minus, we still know that there are two solutions. Okay, let's try another one here. So we have 8x squared plus 3 equals 9x. So again, we need to move some things over. So I'm going to subtract that 9x over. And to make sure that it's in standard form, we've got to do 8x squared. Then the minus 9x has to come next. Then the plus 3, the constant, and set equal to 0. So we're in standard form, and we know our a value is 8. Our b value is negative 9. And our c value is 3. Okay, so now we're going to plug those in again to our formula. So we've got x equals negative b. So that's again like a negative 9. Okay, or just the opposite of negative 9 would be positive 9. But that's how you want to write it. Then plus or minus the square root of our b squared, which is negative 9 squared. You need your parentheses here so that you get the right answer. Minus 4 times our a, which is 8, times our c, which is 3. Whoops. All over 2a, and our a is 8. Okay. So again, let's do what's in underneath the radical first. So you have a negative 9 squared in parentheses so that you get the positive out. Minus 4 times 8 times 3. And you end up getting a negative 15. So now let's go ahead and rewrite this in our simplified version. So remember, negative 9, we're going to call positive 9, plus or minus the square root of, and remember we get negative 15 here, and then all over 2 times 8, which is 16. Now, if we go to check our square root, just like we did in that last one, 15 actually doesn't break down if we think like 3 and 5, and then that doesn't go any further. So that actually doesn't break down. But if you remember from what we talked about the other day, we cannot have this negative under the radical, okay? That is what's called an imaginary number. So we do need to rewrite this and say, okay, x now equals 9 plus or minus, and remember that's when we take out our I and put it in front. So we would just write this as I root 15 instead of the square root of negative 15. And then all over 16. And this one actually is not going to simplify anymore. So we are going to leave this as our answer. X equals 9 plus or minus I times the square root of 15 all over 16. And again, we know there are two solutions there because of the plus or minus. Okay. All right, let's try one more together, and then you'll try one on your own. Okay, so in this one, we have x squared plus 7x equals 78. We're going to subtract over the 78. And to write it in standard form, that's going to look like x squared plus 7x minus 78 equals 0. So we've got an a value of 1, a b value of 7, and a c value of negative 78. All right, so we're going to plug it in here. So we've got x equals negative b, so negative 7 plus or minus the square root of b squared would be 7 squared minus 4 times our a, which is 1, times our c, which is negative 78, all over 2a, which is going to be 2 times 1. So again, let's go ahead and simplify here. So you want to do what's in underneath the radical first. So in your calculator, parentheses 7 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 78. And you should be getting 361. So we want to rewrite this simplified. And that's going to be plus or minus the square root of 361 all over 2, because 2 times 1 is 2. So again, just like before, we want to see, all right, does this 361 break down? And actually, if you do this in your calculator, the square root of 361, it is a perfect square. It equals 19. Okay, so since that's a perfect square, we're going to replace it with 19. So we would write this as x equals negative 7 plus or minus 19 divided by 2. Now, here's the thing. Because that radical broke down, we can actually simplify this as far as it goes. So we would write this as two separate equations. X equals negative 7 plus 19 divided by 2. And x equals negative 7 minus 19 divided by 2. That's what the plus or minus means, right? So we separate it into two equations, one with a plus here and one with a minus here. Okay, then we're going to go ahead and solve. So do the numerator first. So in this case, negative 7 plus 19 is 12. And so 12 divided by 2 is going to give you x equals 6 as one of your solutions. And then negative 7 minus 19 is negative 26. And then divided by 2 is x equals negative 13 as your other solution. So now this is when we actually get two solutions. It doesn't look as ugly as the other answers that we've gotten, but x equals 6 and x equals negative 13. Okay. All right, so those are different types of quadratic formula problems that you'll see. And then what I want you to do here is pause the video and try this last one on your own. All right, so hopefully you paused and you went ahead and got your equation in standard form set equal to 0. And then you found what your A, B, and C values are. And then you plugged it into your equation, your quadratic formula. And then you plugged in what's under the radical first and got 85. And you simplified to get negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 85 all over 6. And that's it. That's your final answer. Okay. So we'll do some more examples with quadratic formula tomorrow during our Zoom. But other than that, have a great night, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.